Most women fight for the house, the custody, or the alimony. Serafina Sterling didn't fight for a single dime. In the high-stakes world of Manhattan's elite, silence is usually an admission of guilt or defeat. Her husband, tech mogul Petrus Sterling, walked out of that courtroom thinking he had pulled off the heist of the century, leaving his wife with nothing but the clothes on her back. He was wrong. Dead wrong. Because 6 hours later, while Petrus was toasting his freedom with cheap champagne, a paparazzi photo surfaced that shattered his reality. Serafina wasn't crying in a studio apartment. She was sipping a vintage Dom Perignon on the aft deck of the Obsidian, the 300-foot super yacht owned by the one man Petrus feared most in the world. The silence wasn't surrender. It was the calm before the nuclear blast. The fluorescent lights of the New York Supreme Court matrimonial term hummed with a headache-inducing frequency that usually drove petitioners mad. But Serafina Sterling sat in the high-backed leather chair as if she were waiting for a manicure at the plaza, not the dismantling of her 10-year marriage. Her husband, Petrus Sterling, sat at the opposing table. He was leaning forward, his elbows digging into the mahogany, radiating the kind of aggressive energy that had built Sterling Dynamics into a multi-billion-dollar logistics empire. He checked his Rolex, a platinum Daytona, every 30 seconds. He had a board meeting at 4, and he wanted this over. Beside him, his lawyer, Garrick Sloan, was arranging a stack of documents 3 inches thick. Sloan was a shark in a Brioni suit, known in the city as the Butcher of Broadway, for how he carved up spouses during settlements. He had prepared for war. He had forensic accountants ready to testify that Serafina's spending habits were reckless private investigators who had tracked her every move for 6 months, and a psychological profile suggesting she was emotionally unstable. They were ready for the screaming. They were ready for the tears, the demands for the Hamptons estate, the fight for the stock options. Mr. Sloan, Judge Harrison, peered over his spectacles. You may present your opening statement regarding the division of assets. Sloan stood up, buttoning his jacket. He smirked at Serafina's lawyer, a court-appointed fill-in named Mr. Abernathy, who looked like he had barely survived the subway ride over. Your Honor, Sloan began, his voice booming. Mr. Sterling has built his fortune through tireless effort. Mrs. Sterling, conversely, has contributed little beyond attending galas. We are prepared to offer a generous stipend of $5,000 a month for 2 years, and she retains the Audi Q7. In exchange, she waives all rights to the Sterling Dynamics, shares the Tribeca penthouse, the Aspen Lodge, and the art collection. It was an insult. It was less than a rounding error in Petrus's bank account. Petrus watched Serafina waiting for the crack in her facade. He wanted to see her break. He wanted her to beg. It was the only way he could justify leaving her for Margot, his 24-year-old PR director, who was currently waiting in the car downstairs. Serafina didn't blink. She wore a simple navy dress, high-necked conservative. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun. She looked at the judge, then at Petrus. Mrs. Sterling, the judge asked, do you have a counter-proposal? The room went silent. The court stenographer hovered her hands over the keys. Serafina leaned toward her microphone. No, Your Honor. Petrus's eyebrows shot up. Sloan froze his mouth half open. Excuse me, the judge asked, frowning. I accept the terms, Serafina said. Her voice was cool, clear, and utterly devoid of emotion. I do not wish to argue. I will sign the agreement as presented by Mr. Sterling's counsel. Sloan leaned down to whisper frantically to Petrus, This is a trick. She's up to something. Nobody walks away from $2 billion. She's broken, Garrick, Petrus whispered back, a cruel smile touching his lips. I told you, she doesn't have the stomach for a fight. She just wants out. But, Your Honor, Sloane stammered, addressing the bench. We expected a negotiation. We have witnesses prepared to... If the respondent accepts the petitioner's terms, Mr. Sloane, there is no need for witnesses, Judge Harrison said, looking baffled. He turned to Serafina. Mrs. Sterling, do you understand that by signing this, you are waiving your right to future alimony or equitable distribution? You are leaving this marriage with significantly less than the law would likely award you. I understand perfectly, Serafina said. She reached into her purse, not a Hermes, but a simple leather tote, and pulled out a pen. Where do I sign? The next 10 minutes were a blur. Papers were shuffled. Signatures were affixed. The heavy wooden gavel banged against the sound block, echoing like a gunshot. Final decree of divorce granted. Petrus stood up, feeling a rush of adrenaline so potent it was almost sexual. He had won. He had destroyed her without firing a single shot. He walked over to her as she packed up her few papers. You did the smart thing, Sarah, Petrus said, his voice dropping to that patronizing tone he used when explaining supply chains to investors. You were never cut out for this life. The Audi is parked out front. The keys are with the bailiff. Serafina finally looked at him. Her eyes were a piercing, icy blue. For a second, Petrus felt a chill run down his spine, a primal warning signal that he ignored. Keep the Audi, Petrus, she said softly. I won't be needing a car. She turned and walked out of the courtroom, her heels clicking a steady, rhythmic beat against the marble floor. She didn't look back. She didn't slump her shoulders. She walked with the posture of a queen who had just ordered an execution. Petrus laughed, turning to high-five Sloane. Did you see that she's delusional? I won't be needing a car. She probably can't afford the gas. I don't like it, Petrus, Sloane muttered, stuffing files into his briefcase. It was too easy. Women like her, they always want the last word. She had the last word, Petrus grinned, and the word was, I surrender. He checked his phone. Margot had texted 3 heart emojis. He was a free man, a billionaire bachelor. The world was his oyster. He had no idea that the oyster was already rotting from the inside out. 3 hours later, Petrus Sterling was seated at the best table in Le Bernardin, Manhattan's premier seafood restaurant. Across from him sat Margot, looking radiant in a red dress that cost more than Serafina's settlement stipend. They were drinking a 1982 Chateau Lafite Rothschild. To us, Margot cooed, clinking her glass against his, and to the end of the wicked witch. Petrus chuckled, savoring the wine. It was pathetic, honestly. She just sat there. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. So what's the plan for the weekend? Margot asked, tracing the rim of her glass. The Hamptons. Or should we take the jet to St. Bart's? St. Bart's, Petrus declared. We need to celebrate properly. His phone buzzed on the table. Then it buzzed again. Then a third time. Petrus frowned. He flipped it over. A text from his CFO, Jim Miller. Check the news, now. Another text from his PR crisis manager. Do not comment. Call me. And then a text from Garrick Sloane. What the hell did she do? Petrus, what is it? Margot asked, sensing the shift in the air. Petrus unlocked his phone and opened Twitter. He didn't have to search for it. It was the #1 trending topic in the United States. The Sterling Divorce. Billionaire Yacht. Who is he? His thumb hovered over the first link, a post from TMZ. The headline hit him like a physical blow to the chest. Freshly divorced. Serafina Sterling spotted dining on the Obsidian. Is this the new power couple? Petrus's breath hitched. He clicked the photo. It was high resolution, taken with a long-range telephoto lens, but crystal clear. It showed the aft deck of a massive super yacht docked just outside the jurisdiction of U.S. waters near the Hamptons. The yacht was black, sleek, and terrifyingly expensive. The Obsidian. Everyone in the business world knew the Obsidian. Seated at a white linen table was Serafina. She wasn't wearing the navy dress anymore. She was wearing a shimmering, backless silver gown that clung to her figure, a figure Petrus hadn't realized she still possessed. Her hair was down, blowing in the sea breeze. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a flute of champagne in her hand. But it was the man sitting across from her that made Petrus's blood run cold. He was older, perhaps mid-50s, with salt and pepper hair, and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He was wearing a casual linen shirt, sleeves rolled up, revealing tanned forearms. He was leaning in, smiling at Serafina, with a look of intense familiarity. "No," Petrus whispered. The glass of wine slipped from his fingers, shattering on the table, splashing red liquid across the white tablecloth like a crime scene. "Petrus!" Margot shrieked, jumping back. "What is wrong with you?" Petrus ignored her. He zoomed in on the man's face. There was no mistake. It was Alessandro Valenti. Alessandro Valenti wasn't just a billionaire. He was the billionaire. An Italian shipping magnate and arms dealer whose net worth made Petrus's look like pocket change. But more importantly, Valenti was the man who had tried to buy Sterling Dynamics 5 years ago in a hostile takeover. Petrus had fought him off, insulted him in the press, and called him a European dinosaur. Valenti had vowed to destroy Petrus. And now, hours after the divorce, Petrus's ex-wife was on Valenti's yacht. "Waiter!" Petrus roared, standing up so abruptly, his chair toppled over. The entire restaurant fell silent. "Petrus, sit down," Margot hissed, her face flushing pink. "She played me," Petrus muttered, his eyes wild. "She didn't want the money because she didn't need it. She has him." He dialed Garrick Sloane's number. Sloane picked up on the first ring. "I see it, Petrus," Sloane said, his voice grim. "I'm looking at the picture." "How long?" Petrus demanded, pacing between the tables. "How long has she known him?" "You said you had PIs on her. You said she was going to yoga and the library." "She was," Sloane insisted. "My guys tailed her 24/7. She never met with Valenti. I swear to God, Petrus, she never left the city." "Then explain to me how she is on his boat, 3 hours after the judge signed the papers." Petrus screamed. "I don't know," Sloane said. "But Petrus, look at the second photo, the one page 6 just posted." Petrus switched apps, his hands shaking. He found the article. The second photo showed Valenti handing Serafina a document. It wasn't a menu. It was a blue folder. Serafina was taking it, her expression serious. The caption read, "Sources close to Valenti suggest the shipping magnate has just appointed a new CEO for his North American logistics division. Rumor has it, the position has been filled by a woman with intimate knowledge of the competition." Petrus felt the room spin. Sterling Dynamics dominated North American logistics. Valenti had been trying to break into that market for a decade. "She's going to run his logistics," Petrus whispered, the horror dawning on him. "She knows my supply chains. She knows my vendor contracts. She knows the weak points in my Asian distribution network. Petrus, Sloane's voice was tinny in his ear. Did you have her sign a non-compete agreement? Petrus froze. In the rush to get the pauper's settlement, in his arrogance to leave her with nothing, he had pushed for a standard clean break document. He wanted her out of the company completely. He hadn't wanted to pay the extra legal fees to draft a complex executive non-compete because Serafina wasn't an executive. She was just a wife. She had no job history. No, Petrus croaked. She has no non-compete because she was a housewife, Garrick. She arranged flowers. We have a problem, Sloane said. A very big problem. Petrus looked at Margot, who was dabbing wine off her dress with a napkin, looking annoyed rather than concerned. He looked at the shattered glass. Serafina hadn't argued because she didn't care about the house or the alimony. She was about to earn a salary that would eclipse his own. And she was going to do it by burning his company to the ground, using the matches he had handed her. He rushed out of the restaurant, leaving Margot sitting alone at the table. He had to get to the office. He had to lock down the servers. But as he stepped out into the cool Manhattan night, he realized something else. The Obsidian was in international waters. Whatever data Serafina had, she was already beyond his reach. The sleek, glass-walled conference room on the 45th floor of Sterling Tower usually offered a commanding view of the Manhattan skyline, a visual reminder of Petrus Sterling's dominance. Tonight, the city lights felt like interrogators' lamps glaring into a dark cell. It was 2:00 a.m. Ties were loosened, sleeves were rolled up, and the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and panic. Petrus paced the length of the room, his expensive loafers making no sound on the plush carpet. Garrick Sloane sat at the table looking significantly less polished than he had in the courtroom. Next to him was Kevin Chang, the chief technology officer of Sterling Dynamics, who looked like he had been dragged out of bed, which he had. "Explain it to me again," Petrus said, his voice dangerously low. "And explain it slowly, because I'm having a hard time understanding how my wife, who I thought was spending her days picking out upholstery swatches, is suddenly the CEO of my biggest competitor's new division." Sloane rubbed his temples. "We went back through the surveillance logs, Petrus. The private investigators followed her every day for 6 months. Her routine was clockwork. Gym at 9 a.m. Public library at 10:30 a.m. Lunch at a salad bar at 1:00 p.m. Back to the library until 4:00 p.m. Home. We thought she was reading, or writing a memoir. It was the New York Public Library, for God's sake. It's a dead zone for corporate espionage. It's not a dead zone if you're smart," Kevin Chang interjected, typing furiously on his laptop. "The Rose main reading room. Public Wi-Fi. It's secure enough if you use a military-grade VPN. And it's public enough that a meeting between two people wouldn't look suspicious. Just two strangers reading books at a long table." Petrus stopped pacing. "She met Valenti at the library." "Not Valenti," Sloane corrected. "We missed it in the reports because it looked so innocuous. But looking back, there was an old man who sat near her almost every Tuesday. We thought he was a homeless guy or a retiree. He wore a tweed jacket, read newspapers. We identified him an hour ago using facial recognition from the PI photos we discarded." Sloane slid a glossy photo across the table. It was a grainy shot of Serafina sitting at a library table. Across from her, an older man with thick glasses was reading a copy of The Financial Times. "That," Sloane said, tapping the photo, "is Arthur Penhaligon. He's a retired barrister from London. He's also Alessandro Valenti's personal consigliere and head of strategy. He wasn't reading the paper. He was vetting her. Petrus felt a vein throb in his forehead. Vetting her for what? She doesn't know anything. She hosted dinner parties. Kevin. She doesn't know code. She doesn't know logistics algorithms. Kevin Chang stopped typing. He looked up, his face pale. Actually, sir, that brings us to the settlement. The settlement, Petrus scoffed. She took nothing, $5,000 a month, and she didn't even take the car. She took one thing, Sloan said, his voice trembling slightly. In the miscellaneous assets addendum, item 404. Petrus frowned. He remembered the addendum. It was a list of junk assets, failed investments, depreciated equipment, things they usually wrote off for tax purposes. What is item 404? Ownership of the Orion Beta repository and all associated intellectual property rights, Kevin said. Petrus blinked. Then he laughed, a harsh barking sound. Orion Beta. That piece of trash that was the routing software we tried to develop 3 years ago to automate the Pacific shipping lanes. It crashed the simulation servers every time. We scrapped it in 2021. It's worthless code. I was glad to get it off the books so we didn't have to pay maintenance fees on the cloud storage. Sir, Kevin said, turning his laptop screen toward Petrus. Do you remember why we scrapped it? Because it was buggy. It couldn't handle the variables. We scrapped it because the lead developer quit and said the architecture was impossible. Kevin corrected. But during the lockdown, do you remember when Serafina asked for access to a computer? She said she wanted to learn Photoshop to organize the family albums. Yes, Petrus said, confused. I gave her an old laptop. That laptop had the admin keys to the Orion server, Kevin said. I just checked the change logs on the repository. The account admin02 has been active for 18 months. Thousands of commits, millions of lines of code rewritten. Petrus felt the room spin. Serafina. She has a degree in mathematics from MIT, Petrus, Sloan whispered. You knew that when you married her. That was 20 years ago, Petrus shouted. She never used it. She used it for the last 2 years, Kevin said, his voice filled with a terrified awe. While you were occupied with Margot, Serafina was fixing Orion. I'm looking at the simulation results she ran last week, just before the divorce finalized. Petrus. This isn't just a routing software anymore. She integrated a quantum heuristic predictive model. It anticipates supply chain disruptions before they happen. Weather strikes political instability. It routes around them 3 days in advance. Petrus stared at the screen. Lines of code cascaded down, elegant and complex. If this works, Kevin swallowed hard. It cuts shipping times by 40%. It saves fuel costs by 30%. It's the holy grail of logistics. And because you signed item 404, she owns it. 100%. Sterling Dynamics has no claim to it. Petrus fell into a chair. The silence in the room was deafening. He had handed his ex-wife a nuclear weapon because he thought it was a box of broken toys. Valenti knows, Petrus whispered. That's why she's on the yacht. She didn't just bring him her resume. She brought him the engine that kills us. It gets worse, Sloan said, looking at his phone. I just got an alert from the SEC filings. What? Petrus snapped. What else could possibly go wrong? Valenti just registered a new subsidiary in Delaware, Sloan read. Named Astrea Logistics, The filing lists the CEO as Serafina Sterling, and the filing lists the initial capital investment at $4 billion. Petrus closed his eyes. Astria, the Greek goddess of justice. She's not just working for him. Petrus realized the horror, total and absolute. They're partners. She brought the tech, he brought the money, and they are going to come for my clients. We need to lock down our contracts, Kevin said, standing up. I need to patch our systems. If she built Orion using her knowledge of our current weak points, she knows exactly where to hit us. Do it, Petrus snarled. Wake everyone up. I want every lawyer, every engineer, every account manager in this building by 500 a.m. If Serafina wants a war, I'll give her a war. She might be smart, but I have the market share. I have the infrastructure. But as his team scrambled to obey, Petrus looked out the window at the dark Hudson River. Somewhere out there beyond the horizon, the Obsidian was floating. He could picture Serafina there, maybe sleeping, maybe working. For 10 years he had treated her like a trophy, an ornament. He had talked over her at dinners, ignored her advice, and cheated on her with a woman whose primary qualification was her youth. He had assumed Serafina was weak because she was quiet. He realized now with a sickening jolt that she hadn't been quiet. She had been stealthy. The weekend passed in a blur of caffeine and shouting. By Monday morning, the atmosphere at Sterling Dynamics was closer to a bunker under siege than a corporate headquarters. Petrus hadn't slept in 48 hours. He was wearing the same suit, now wrinkled. Status, he barked, walking into the trading floor. Stock is down, what in pre-market trading, a junior analyst yelled. The rumors about the Valenti partnership are spooking investors. Stabilize it, Petrus ordered. Get the PR team to release a statement. Tell them we have our own AI in development. Lie if you have to. At 9:00 a.m. the market opened. The bell rang. At 9:05 a.m. the first phone call came. It was from the VP of Operations at Global Foods, the largest grocery distributor in North America. They were Sterling Dynamics' anchor client, responsible for 15% of their annual revenue. Put it on speaker, Petrus said, leaning over the conference phone. He forced a smile into his voice. Jim, good morning. To what do I owe the pleasure? Petrus. Jim's voice was cold, businesslike. I'm calling to inform you that we are invoking the termination clause in our logistics contract, effective immediately. The room went dead silent. Jim, Petrus laughed nervously. You can't be serious. The termination penalty is $50 million. You're going to eat that cost just to switch carriers. We aren't eating the cost, Petrus, Jim said. Our new provider has agreed to pay the penalty for us, in cash, this morning. Petrus gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. Who, Jim? Who is offering you that kind of deal? Astria Logistics, Jim said. And frankly, Petrus, it's not just about the money. I just sat through a demo with Serafina. The platform she showed us. It makes your system look like an abacus. She showed us how your routing delayed our perishables by 12 hours last month during the storm in Ohio. Her system predicted that storm 4 days out. We can't compete using your tech anymore. It's over. The wire for the penalty is already sent. Goodbye, Petrus. The line clicked dead. 50 million, Sloane whispered, horrified. Valenti just wrote a $50 million check to steal our biggest client. It's not Valenti, Petrus hissed. It's her. She knows Jim. She knows he hates delays more than he cares about price. She pitched him exactly what he needed. Sir, A secretary ran into the room holding a tablet. "You need to see this." She held up the screen. It was a live stream, a press conference taking place at the Valenti Harbour Club. Serafina stood at a podium. She looked immaculate in a white power suit, sharp, modern, aggressive. The housewife look was gone. She looked like a predator. Behind her was the logo for Astria Logistics. For years, Serafina was saying to the cameras, her voice confident and projected, "The logistics industry has been stagnant. We have accepted delays as inevitable. We have accepted inefficiency as the cost of doing business. Today that ends. Astria is not just a shipping company. It is a promise that we know where the world is going before it gets there." A reporter shouted a question. "Mrs. Sterling, sorry, Ms. Valenti. Are you targeting your ex-husband's company specifically?" Serafina smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a chess grandmaster moving a queen. "I am Serafina Vane," she corrected using her maiden name. "And I am not targeting anyone. I am simply offering the market a superior product. If other companies cannot keep up with the future, that is their failure, not my strategy." She looked directly into the camera lens. Petrus felt like she was looking right into his soul. "However," she continued, "I am announcing today an open hiring initiative. To all the engineers, data scientists, and logistics managers who feel their talents are being ignored or undervalued by their current leadership, Astria is hiring. We pay 20% above market rate, and we offer full IP ownership sharing." Petrus slammed his fist onto the table. "Cut the feed. She's poaching the staff," Kevin Chang said, standing up. "She's doing it live on television." Petrus's phone began to vibrate. It wasn't a client this time. It was a text message. Then another. Then another. He looked around the room. 3 of his senior engineers were looking at their phones. They looked at each other. Then slowly one of them stood up. "Where are you going?" Petrus demanded. I have a lunch appointment," the engineer stammered. He grabbed his laptop bag. "If you walk out that door, you're fired," Petrus screamed. "Okay," the engineer said. He didn't look scared. He looked relieved. "I quit." He walked out. Then the second engineer stood up. Then the lead architect for the server farm. "Stop!" Petrus roared. "I made you." "You are nothing without Sterling Dynamics." "Actually, sir," the lead architect said, pausing at the door. "We built this company while you were on your yacht, and we remember who actually read our reports. It wasn't you. It was Mrs. Sterling. She sent us thank you notes. She remembered our kids' birthdays. She knows the code." Within 10 minutes, the engineering floor was half empty. Petrus stood amidst the ruin of his morning. He had lost his biggest client. He was bleeding talent, and his stock price was free-falling, down 12% in an hour. "Get me my car," Petrus said, his voice shaking. "Where are you going?" Sloane asked frantically, trying to draft injunctions that wouldn't hold up in court. "I'm going to see her," Petrus said. "She can't do this. There are rules. There are unwritten rules." "Petrus, don't," Sloane warned. "She's not the woman you married. You're walking into a trap." "I have to stop this," Petrus said, adjusting his tie. "I still have leverage. I have to have leverage." But as he walked to the elevator, his mind raced, trying to find a single piece of leverage he held over Serafina. He thought of the house, the money, the social status, all things she had discarded, like trash. He realized with a growing dread that the only leverage he ever had was her love for him. And he had killed that deliberately and thoroughly for 3 years. He was going to meet her with empty hands. Petrus didn't take the company car. He drove his Aston Martin himself, tearing through the Midtown Tunnel and out toward the Brooklyn Navy Yard. That's where the tracker, on the Astrea Logistics press release, had geotagged their headquarters. He expected a dusty warehouse. What he found was Building 77, a massive industrial cathedral of concrete and glass that had been rapidly and expensively renovated. Security guards in black suits, not the sleepy rental cops he used, but men who looked like ex-Mossad, stopped him at the gate. "I'm Petrus Sterling," he spat, leaning out the window. "I'm here to see your boss." The guard didn't even check a clipboard. "Ms. Vane is expecting you, Mr. Sterling. Park in spot A1. Expecting him. The arrogance made his teeth ache. He stormed into the lobby. It was a hive of activity. He recognized faces, people. He had fired people. He had overlooked people who had quit days ago. They were working on holographic displays, arguing over code in hushed, excited tones. They looked happy. They looked motivated in a way his employees never did. He was ushered into a corner office that looked out over the East River. Serafina was standing by a whiteboard covered in complex equations. She wasn't alone. Arthur Penhaligon, the old British lawyer, sat on a sofa sipping tea. "You can leave us, Arthur," Serafina said, not turning around. Arthur stood, buttoned his tweed jacket, and nodded to Petrus. "Mr. Sterling, a pleasure as always." He walked out, closing the heavy glass door. "You stole my employees," Petrus accused, skipping the pleasantries. "You stole my code. You stole my client." Serafina finally turned. She took the cap off a red marker and set it down with a click. "I didn't steal anything, Petrus. The code was in the assets you discarded. The employees were at will. And the client? The client left because you stopped caring about the quality of your service the moment you hit $1 billion. I'm going to sue you," Petrus growled, stepping closer. He wanted to loom over her, to use his height, to intimidate her, a tactic that had worked for a decade. "I will bury you in litigation. I will tie up Orion in court for 10 years. You won't be able to ship a single package." "Sit down, Petrus," Serafina said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it had a command to it that stopped him in his tracks. "I'm not sitting. I said sit down." She walked to her desk and picked up a file. "Or I release the audit." Petrus froze. "What audit?" "The one I ran while I was playing housewife last year," she said, tossing the file onto the glass table between them. "I knew you were cooking the books, Petrus. I knew you were inflating the asset value of the Asian warehouses to secure the loans from Deutsche Bank. That's fraud. Federal bank fraud." Petrus felt the blood drain from his face. You can't prove that." "I have the real ledgers," she said calmly. "I copied them the same night I copied the Orion code. Why do you think I didn't ask for alimony? Why do you think I didn't want the stock?" She leaned forward, her blue eyes hard as diamonds. "Because Sterling Dynamics is a sinking ship, Petrus. It's built on debt and lies. If I had taken half, I would have been liable for half the fraud when the SEC eventually looks under the hood. I wanted a clean break so that when you go to prison, I'm not standing next to you." Petrus collapsed onto the sofa. The air left his lungs. He had thought she was weak. He had thought she was stupid. But she had been watching him commit crimes for years, gathering evidence, waiting for the moment to cut herself loose. "What do you want?" Petrus whispered. He was broken. The fight was gone. "I want you to stop," Serafina said. "Drop the lawsuits. Let the employees go if they want to come here, and publicly wish me luck. If you do that, the file stays in my safe. If you don't, I mail it to the Southern District Attorney tomorrow morning." Petrus looked at the file. It was thick. It was his life bound in manila paper. "You loved me once," he said, his voice cracking. A pathetic last-ditch appeal to emotion. "I did," Serafina admitted, her expression softening for just a fraction of a second. "I loved the man who built a company in a garage. I didn't love the man who thought he was a god because he had a platinum credit card. Goodbye, Petrus." He stood up, his legs shaky. He walked to the door, a defeated man. He had lost his wife, his best staff, his biggest client, and now his dignity. He was a king without a kingdom held hostage by the queen he had exiled. As he left, he saw Serafina turn back to the whiteboard, already dismissing him from her mind. She had work to do. The victory champagne tasted like ash in Serafina's mouth. It was 2 weeks later. Astria Logistics was the darling of Wall Street. They had signed 3 more major contracts. Sterling Dynamics stock had plummeted 40%, and rumors of Petrus's mental breakdown were circulating in the tabloids. Serafina stood on the balcony of the penthouse Valenti had provided for her in Monaco. Below, the Mediterranean glittered under the moonlight. It was everything she had planned. She was free. She was powerful. She was respected. So why did she feel a knot of dread in her stomach? "You look troubled, Cara," a deep voice rumbled. Alessandro Valenti stepped out onto the balcony. He was wearing a tuxedo holding 2 glasses of cognac. He looked every inch the benevolent emperor. "Just tired," Serafina said, accepting the glass. "Scaling the server architecture is proving difficult. The demand is higher than we anticipated." "A good problem to have." Valenti smiled. He leaned against the railing, looking out at his yacht, the Obsidian, anchored in the harbor. "But that is not why I am here. We need to discuss the next phase of Orion." "The next phase?" Serafina frowned. "We haven't even finished the integration for the North American retail sector." "Retail is boring," Valenti said, waving his hand dismissively. "Grocery stores, Amazon packages, that is for paying the bills. But you and I know that Orion is capable of much more." He took a sip of cognac, his eyes fixing on hers. "I have a client," Valenti said softly. "A very private client. They need to move specialized hardware through international waters, without customs inspections, without digital footprints." Serafina went still. "Alessandro, we talked about this. Astria is a legitimate business. We operate in the light. We operate to make money." Valenti corrected, his tone hardening. "And my client is willing to pay 10 times the market rate. But they need Orion. They need the predictive algorithm to route their ships around NATO naval patrols in the Black Sea." Serafina set her glass down on the railing. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs. "NATO patrols? You want to use my software to smuggle weapons," she stated flatly. "I want to use our software to facilitate logistics." Valenti smiled, but the warmth was gone. It was the smile of a shark. "You provided the brain, Serafina. I provided the muscle and the money. Did you really think I invested $4 billion just to help you deliver lettuce faster?" "I won't do it," Serafina said. "I left Petrus because he was a fraud. I'm not going to become an arms dealer for you." Valenti chuckled. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and danger. "You have already done it, my dear. Look at your contract." "I read the contract," Serafina said defiantly. I have veto power over all operational decisions. Over Astrea Logistics, Valenti agreed. But if you look at the fine print of the server hosting agreement, the hardware Orion runs on belongs to Valenti Maritime. And I have already uploaded the new routing parameters. The ship's launch tonight. Serafina felt a cold chill. He had bypassed her. He had used her to build the ultimate smuggling tool, and now he was hijacking it. I'll shut it down, she said. I'll crash the system. I wrote the code Alessandro. I know the kill switch. Valenti grabbed her wrist. His grip was like iron. If you touch that code, he whispered, his face inches from hers, I will release the photos. What photos? Serafina pulled her arm back, but he held fast. The photos of you and me, the meetings in the library, the money transfers I made to your offshore accounts to set up this company. The world thinks you are a brilliant woman who outsmarted her husband, but with a few well-placed leaks, I can make it look like you were my mistress, that you stole corporate secrets from Sterling Dynamics at my instruction, that you are a corporate spy. That's a lie. It doesn't matter. Valenti grinned. Petrus is already screaming about fraud. If I corroborate his story, you go to prison, Serafina, for industrial espionage, and while you are in a cell, I will own Orion completely. He let go of her wrist. The ships sail at midnight, Valenti said, straightening his jacket. Do nothing. Enjoy your view. Enjoy your billions. Or fight me and lose everything. He walked back into the penthouse, leaving her alone on the balcony. Serafina looked down at her trembling hands. She had traded a fool for a monster. Petrus had been a greedy child. Valenti was a seasoned predator. He had checkmated her. Or so he thought. She looked at her watch. 11:15 p.m. She had 45 minutes before the ships launched. She thought about Petrus. She thought about the useless asset she had fought for. She thought about the file in her safe. And then she remembered something else. Something she hadn't told anyone. Not Petrus, not Sloane, and certainly not Valenti. Orion wasn't just a program. It was a learning AI. And for the last 6 months, Serafina had been teaching it not just how to route ships, but how to judge them. She pulled out her phone. She didn't dial a lawyer. She dialed the one number she swore she would never call again. Petrus, she said, when he answered, his voice groggy and drunken. Go to hell, Sarah, Petrus slurred. Shut up and listen, she said, her voice cutting through the static. Do you want your company back? Do you want to destroy Valenti? Because I'm about to do something crazy, and I need the one thing you have that I don't. What? Petrus asked, sounding confused. I need your security clearance, Serafina said. I need access to the U.S. Naval Satellite Network. I know you still have the contractor codes from the military logistics deal you did in 2018. Why? Because. Serafina looked at the obsidian. I'm not going to crash the system. I'm going to light it up. I'm going to make every one of Valenti's ghost ships visible to every radar screen in the world. He'll kill you, Petrus said, sobering up instantly. He might, Serafina said, feeling a strange electric calm settle over her. But he's not going to own me. Are you in? There was a long pause on the other end. I'm in, Petrus said. The clock struck 11:45 p.m. In a darkened study in his Upper East Side townhouse, Petrus Sterling sat bathed in the blue glow of 3 monitors. He was sweating. His hands, usually so steady when signing contracts, trembled as he navigated the archaic interface of the Defense Logistics Agency portal. I'm at the gateway, Petrus said into his headset. "But my credentials, they expired 6 months ago. If this triggers a lockout, the FBI will be at my door in 10 minutes. "They won't lock out," Serafina's voice came through, calm and rhythmic, typing in sync with him from her penthouse in Monaco. "I'm tunneling your connection through the Orion server. To the DoD system, you don't look like a former contractor. You look like a routine automated ping from a supply drone. Just enter the codes, Petrus. Fast." Petrus took a breath. He typed the alphanumeric string he had memorized years ago, the key to the satellite uplinks used for tracking military cargo. Access granted. "I'm in," Petrus exhaled. "I see the grid. Global maritime traffic. It's massive." "Find the Black Sea sector," Serafina commanded. "Look for the void spaces, the areas where the water is displaced but no transponder signal exists." Petrus scrolled. "I see them. 3 anomalies, moving fast toward Sevastopol." "Those are Valenti's ships," Serafina said. "Right now they are using Orion to mimic the background noise of the ocean. They are invisible to radar. I'm going to upload a patch. I call it the Lighthouse Protocol." "What does it do?" "It inverts the stealth algorithm," Serafina explained. "Instead of absorbing radar waves, the ships are going to amplify them. They're going to light up like Christmas trees on every military dashboard, from Turkey to Washington." "Do it," Petrus said. In Monaco, Serafina hit enter. On the bridge of the obsidian, Alessandro Valenti was enjoying a cigar. His phone buzzed. It was the captain of his lead smuggling vessel, the Nemesis. "Boss," the captain's voice was panicked. "We have a problem." "What problem?" Valenti snapped. "You should be ghosting past the blockade." "We were, and then everything turned on. The alarms are screaming. My radar cross-section just jumped by 5,000%. We're broadcasting a signal on the emergency frequencies." "Turn it off," Valenti roared. "We can't. The ship's computer is locked. It's displaying a message." "What message?" "It says, 'Courtesy of Astria Logistics. Transparency is our priority.'" Valenti threw his cigar onto the deck. He looked up at the penthouse balcony. It was empty. Suddenly, the night sky to the east lit up. Not with fireworks, but with flares. 2 NATO frigates and a Coast Guard cutter were converging on the smuggling ships. The game was up. Valenti didn't run to the penthouse. He ran to his helicopter on the helipad. He had to get to international airspace. He had to. The sound of sirens cut through the harbor air. French police boats were swarming the obsidian. Valenti froze. His phone rang again. It wasn't his captain. It was Serafina. "It's over, Alessandro," she said. Her voice wasn't afraid anymore. "I just sent the full server logs to Interpol. They know about the arms. They know about the money laundering. And they know you coerced me." "You destroyed everything," Valenti screamed, watching the police board his yacht. "You destroyed $1 billion empire." "No," Serafina said. "I just corrected a routing error. Goodbye, Alessandro." Valenti dropped the phone as the police tackled him. 6 months later. The coffee shop in Greenwich Village was quiet, the smell of roasted beans and rain filling the air. Petrus Sterling sat at a corner table reading the Wall Street Journal. Sterling Dynamics announces quarterly profit. The comeback kid. He smiled a genuine, tired smile. The company was half the size it used to be. He had sold off the private jets. He had fired the yes men. He was actually working again, reading reports, meeting clients, fixing problems. It was hard work, but he slept better at night. The bell above the door jingled. Serafina walked in. She looked different, softer than the corporate shark phase, but stronger than the housewife phase. She wore a simple trench coat and jeans. She didn't look like a billionaire, though technically she was. "Hello, Petrus," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Sarah." He nodded. "Thanks for meeting me." "I can't stay long," she said. "I have a flight to Zurich. The UN wants to discuss using Orion for humanitarian aid distribution." "Humanitarian aid," Petrus chuckled. "A bit different than dodging NATO patrols." "A bit," she smiled. She placed a small box on the table. It was the keys to the Audi Q7, the car from the divorce settlement. "I found these in a drawer," she said. "I figured you might want to sell it. Add it to the company assets." Petrus looked at the keys. "Keep it, or donate it. I don't need it." He paused, looking at her hands. She wasn't wearing any rings. "I wanted to say thank you," Petrus said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved me. You could have let Valenti destroy me along with himself. But you didn't." "I didn't do it for you, Petrus," Serafina said gently. "I did it because I refused to be a victim. And because I remembered the man who used to stay up all night with me, dreaming about making the world more efficient. I wanted to give that man a second chance." Petrus reached out, covering her hand with his, for a brief moment. "I'm sorry, Sarah. For everything. For Margot. For the silence. For not seeing you." "I know," she said. She pulled her hand back, not unkindly but firmly. "But apologies don't rewrite Code Petrus. We can't go back to version 1.0. "I know," he said. "So what happens now?" "Now." Serafina stood up, buttoning her coat. "Now we compete. Astria is bidding on the Amazon contract next week." Petrus laughed. It was a sound of pure challenge. "Is that so? Well, you better bring your A game, Ms. Vane, because Sterling Dynamics just upgraded our servers." "May the best system win," she said, her eyes twinkling. She walked out into the rain, opening her umbrella. Petrus watched her go. He watched until she turned the corner and vanished into the city. He wasn't angry. He wasn't sad. He picked up his coffee and took a sip. For the first time in 10 years, he wasn't looking for a trophy. He was looking forward to the fight. And that is the story of Serafina Sterling, the woman who proved that silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes it's just the sound of someone reloading. She walked away with nothing but her dignity and a useless computer file, and she used them to topple 2 titans of industry. It's a reminder that in life and in divorce, the most dangerous person in the room is the one who knows your secrets and has nothing left to lose. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, redemption, and high-stakes corporate warfare, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. We drop new stories every week. Let me know in the comments, would you have forgiven Petrus or would you have left him to rot? Thanks for watching.